Good morning, beautiful people. It is great to be with you today. It's great to be back with you. I've been told that Craig updated you on everything, so I'm assuming this is all just rehashing. But nevertheless, family and I were out in Lake Tahoe, camping in South Lake Tahoe, which is beautiful. There are bears. I didn't know that. Well, I did know that. I never camped with bears before, but we made it. We're okay. We were out there for the Tahoe family encampment. A bunch of Christians get together in South Lake Tahoe. Think old-style tent meetings, get together, learn a little bit about God, sing praises to Him, and then from about 12 until about 6 o'clock, you go enjoy Tahoe. Which leads me to this. I do this trip about every year. If you want to go with me, just let me know. I'll be happy to tell you all the ins and outs. We'd love to have you guys come join us out in Lake Tahoe. It's always in July, which means it's 80 degrees there and it's 100 and something here. So if you're ready to escape for a minute and regather yourself before we push through the end of summer, it'd be a great thing to do. 10. The power of 10. According to those who research such things, most of us engage in change with a fairly similar format, and that is that we at some point recognize that change is needed. We gather up the energy and the desire to change, and we exert this pent-up energy in an attempt to change over a course of a week or 2 weeks, and we spend all this energy and this time trying to change, and then at some point that energy dies off, and we kind of end up in the same place that we were before we started. You know, that whole New Year's resolution thing that you did for all of 2 days. According to those who research such things, a better idea is to do small amounts of effort to change over a long period of time. So the example of being 10 minutes. That 10 minutes can change your life. 10 minutes a day over a long course of time is significantly better than 10 hours a day over a short period of time. Because that 10 hours a day, that attempt to change a lot in a short period of time usually doesn't last. As opposed to consistency over time usually results in significant, lasting, long-term change or growth. I want us to read our text together today. Joshua chapter 24, verses 14 through 15. Let's read it together. Now therefore, fear the Lord and serve Him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That question, choose this day whom you will serve. That all of us who are baptized, when we chose to be baptized, we chose that day that we were going to serve our God and dedicate our lives to Him. But it's not really a choice that was designed to be a single moment in time. That yes, on that day when we were baptized, we chose to follow Him, but it's to be a choice that we continue to choose every day. That each day we wake up and we say, this day will I choose to serve my God. And it's my confident belief that all of us here desire to do that, because I don't think you'd be here otherwise. All of us want to choose to serve God more and more each day, to grow in our belief in Him, to grow in our commitment to Him. I want us to look at Matthew chapter 6. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Notice that last sentence. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. That each day has its own unique challenges and troubles that we should focus on and not worry about others. It seems to convey the idea that each day is a little bit different. That each day has its own unique challenges, its own unique components. And if that's the case, that each day is a little bit different than the other, that each day has its own unique challenges and difficulties, own unique things that we have to face, then that would suggest that the choice to this day will I choose to serve the Lord is going to look a little bit different from day to day. What I mean by that is this. The goal is to serve our God, and to each day say, I will serve my God with all my heart, soul, strength, and mind. However, because each day has its own unique challenges, its own unique difficulties, the way we go about that may look different from one day to the next, because each day is a little bit different. And today I want us to look at how we might serve our God in the different types of days that we may very well encounter. Now, the first type of day we might encounter is that of mountaintops. I want us to turn to 2 Kings, but before you do that, I wonder, how many Bibles do we have? How many Bibles are there? What a fantastic sight. We're going to be looking at several passages together, none of which will be on the screen. 2 Kings chapter 6, and we're going to look at verses 16 through 17. I want to set up what's taking place here. The king of Syria desires to capture the prophet Elisha. He believes the prophet Elisha to be a significant threat to his military might. And so he decides to try and capture Elisha, and he receives word that Elisha's at a particular house in a particular town in a particular place. And so he sends, the text seems to suggest part of his army, but the way that it reads is it's a significant part of his army. Horses, chariots, generals, and sends this whole armada to go and capture one man, the prophet Elisha. The day breaks. The servant looks outside the window, and the sight he sees is the entire house encircled by a large portion, maybe even the entire Syrian army. And I suspect that the blood-curdling scream that echoed from his lips could be heard everywhere as he saw everything that was around him and knew that the entire might of the Syrian army had come purely for the prophet Elisha. And that's where we pick up in verse 16. He, that is Elisha, said, "Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Then Elisha prayed and said, "O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see." And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. It's one of my favorite texts because it conveys the idea that those who are for us are more than those who are against us. I kind of wonder if Paul had this text in mind when he will pen Romans chapter 8 and says, if God is for us, who can be against us? Neither heights nor depths nor demons nor principalities nor anything can be against us if we are with our God. That those who are for us are more than those who are against us. And I wonder, what was it like? What was it like for Elisha? What was it like for his servant? To one moment see the house surrounded by this Syrian army, and then a light switch to come on, and see surrounding, encapsulating that army, a secondary ring filling the mountains full of chariots of fire ablaze, waiting, all of them, to come to the aid of Elisha. What a moment in time. Kind of wonder if it wasn't a mountaintop experience. A mountaintop experience to see the might of God, to be reminded that we're not alone and by ourselves, to be reminded of how much God cared for him and how much he was willing to come to his aid. What a mountaintop moment. All of us at some point have mountaintop moments. Those moments when we're reminded of the goodness of God. When we find ourselves singing, "All my life you've been faithful. All my life you've been so, so good." For cognitively, we know that he's good, but on mountaintop experiences, we can feel the goodness in our bones. We find ourselves singing, elated at what he's done for us. Almost our steps a little bit lighter, and we can find ourselves skipping along a little bit. Those mountaintop moments. And thank God for mountaintop moments. Thank God for moments in time where we're reminded of just how good he is. How much he's been with us, how much he's forgiven us, how much he's taken care of us. Thank God for those moments. They give us the energy, the fuel to keep pushing through. But as all of us are intimately aware, every day cannot be a mountaintop moment. In fact, there's the philosophical reality that if every moment were a mountaintop moment, there would be no mountaintop moments. Not every day can be a mountaintop moment. Sometimes we face more of what David might have described as the valley of the shadow of death. Those moments when life seems dark, when it feels like life is about to swallow us whole and then spit us out. Those moments when the weight of the world seems to be pressing on our shoulders, threatening to flatten us, and the world somehow seems dark. But it seems that the valley of the shadow of death, those kind of days can kind of be subdivided into two different types of days. The first can be that of days of trials. I want us to turn to Psalm chapter 57. Psalm 57. If you've heard me talk about reading the Psalms before, then you know that when we read the Psalms, we don't start at verse 1. Because all of the Psalms, well, most of the Psalms, have a superscript. Usually that's written to the choir master, and sometimes that superscript simply reads about how it was to be sung or what kind of melody it was to be accompanied by. But sometimes details are given about the circumstances of the song. And so as we're reading the song, before we read verse 1, we have to read the superscript. And notice the superscript here. To the choir master, according to do not destroy. A mitchem of David when he fled from Saul in the cave. If you're familiar with the story of David, you'll recall that David is, for many years, in the midst of the wilderness, fleeing from his father-in-law, Saul, who is the king, the man who was supposed to love him, the man whose daughter he'd married, who was supposed to try and take care of him, is the very man who seeks to try and destroy destroy David simply because David existed. And for not days, not weeks, not months, but for years, David will flee from Saul in the midst of the wilderness. And it's in that context when this psalm is written, beginning in verse 1. Be merciful to me, O God. Be merciful to me. For in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I will take refuge. Till the storms of destruction pass by, I will cry out to God Most High, to God who fulfills his purposes for me. He will send from heaven and save me. He will put to shame him who tramples on me. God will send out his steadfast love and his faithfulness. My soul is in the midst of lions. I lie down amid fiery beasts. The children of man whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. They set a net for my steps. My soul was bowed down. They dug a pit in my way, but they have fallen into it themselves. My heart is steadfast, O God. My heart is steadfast. I will sing and make melody. Awake, my glory. Awake, O harp and lyre. I will awake the dawn. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the peoples. I will sing praises to you among the nations. For your steadfast love is great to the heavens, your faithfulness to the clouds. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. Did you hear the two tensions at work in the psalm? That on the one hand, there's this life seemed like a storm of destruction. What an apt way to describe days that feel like walking through the valley of the shadow of death. I remember as a kid watching Pooh and Eeyore. And you remember Eeyore always had this cloud up above him, the rain trickling down, just to let it be known that he was miserable. Not quite a really apt description of the valley of the shadow of death. For in those days, it's not this cloud with a slight trickle, but rather it's this raging storm over us that seems to follow us wherever we go. There's this tension on the one hand of the valley of the shadow of death and the challenges that exist, yet at the others there's I will remain steadfast. I will sing your praises. And throughout the psalm, both tensions are at work with one another. That my goodness, life is hard, but I'm going to remain faithful. But it's like a storm, but I'm going to remain steadfast. I remember earlier this year, and my goodness, is it hard to believe that it was earlier this year. Now, you guys walked through one of those valleys of the shadow of death with Aurora and I, as Lily lay there in the NICU. And if you remember the story, we thought she was going to get to go home with us because she was finally going to be our child who didn't have to go to the NICU. And then 2 hours before we were supposed to go home, she turned blue and had to stay there in the NICU for about a week. And you might recall me standing up here crying because my little girl's over there in the NICU. And I remember in the midst of that time, the worst part was waking up in the morning because her crib was in our room. And the worst part is waking up and the crib is empty. Where she's supposed to be, there is nothing. And I remember in the midst of all of that, two things going through my mind. One, that song of, I will praise you in the storm. And this prayer that I will praise you in the midst of the storm. But I also remember a second prayer that I'm so thankful for my God who can hold my little girl when I can't. That in the midst of the storms of life, in the midst of trials, we say, I will praise you in the storm because I know you haven't abandoned me. I will remain steadfast because I know that you're there. And we're able to say, this day will I serve the Lord because I know that even in the midst of the valley of the shadow of death, even in the midst of these trials, my God is still there. And so long as I walk with him and remain steadfast, he will never forsake me. But there's another type of valley of the shadow of death day. And that is one of shame. I want us to look at Psalm 51. Again, we don't start at verse 1. We start with a superscript. Notice what it says. To the choir master, a psalm of David. When Nathan the prophet went to him after he'd gone in to Bathsheba. Do you remember the story of David and what takes place there? Do you remember that David is a man after God's own heart, but he ends up having quite the significant debacle with Bathsheba. An adulterous relationship that will culminate in the premeditated murder of Uriah, her husband. It's about a year after that whole debacle has taken place that this psalm is written. And we know that because the child that is conceived as a result of that adulterous relationship is born before Nathan shows up. And I can't help but wonder if David thought he'd gotten away with it. After all, it had been a year. But I want you to listen for what he describes and how he describes his state of mind. Beginning in verse 1. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love, according to your abundant mercy. Blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Against you only have I sinned, and does what is evil in your sight, so that you may be justified in your words and blameless in your judgment. Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Behold, you delight in truth in the inward being, and you teach me wisdom in the secret heart. Purge me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones that you have broken rejoice. Hide your face from my sins, and blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, and take not your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and uphold me with a willing spirit. Then I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners will return to you. Deliver me from guiltlessness, O God of my salvation, and my tongue will sing aloud of your righteousness. O Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will declare your praise. For you will not delight in sacrifice, or I would give it. You will not be pleased with a burnt offering, the sacrifice of God for a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. O God, you will not despise. Do good to Zion in your good pleasure. Build up the walls of Jerusalem. Then will you delight in right sacrifices, in burnt offerings and whole burnt offerings. Then bulls will be offered on your altar. Did you notice David's words? My sin is ever before me. I wonder if he thought he'd gotten away with it. It'd been about a year. But all of us are aware of the reality that we never actually really get away with anything. One, we are not anywhere near as good at hiding things as we think we are. But secondly, that even if we do end up being good at it, even if we do manage to be able to hide it from everybody else, we still know. And God knows. And we know God knows. And the result is this scenario where we walk around with this weight of shame weighing on our shoulders, for we've come to the belief that we are somehow Christians second class because of the shame and the guilt that we feel. And walk around with this shame that hangs over us like a dark cloud. And we know that there's nothing we can do to fix it. That's what David expresses. He says, I can't offer any sacrifices to make it go away. I can't undo what I've done. I can't somehow make it better. It's just there. Perpetually there before me. There's a man who tells a story of a dream he once had. A dream where he walks into this room with file cabinets. File cabinets wall to wall, floor to ceiling. And he walks over to one of them and he opens it and pulls out the first file. And curious, because we are curious creatures, he opens it. And as he begins to read, he realizes with horror that it is a verbatim record of something that he said to his mom when he was 12 years old. And he quickly puts it back and opens the second one and realizes it's yet another conversation from a few years later. And to his horror, he begins to realize that this entire room is a record of everything that he's ever said, everything that he's ever done, wall to wall, floor to ceiling, record of everything. And he came to the conclusion that all of us would, and that is, I got to burn this place to the ground. And so he set about beginning to try and grab a match to burn this place so that nobody could ever find it when the door opened. And who should walk in but Jesus himself? The man thought to himself, not here, not now, anybody but him. Anybody but Jesus in this place with this record. And Jesus goes over and opens the first file cabinet, pulls out the first file. And there's a tear in his eye as he looks at the man there and realizes a look of mercy, compassion, sorrow, and pain. And Jesus quickly writes on it, puts it back, pulls out another one. And in what seems like no time at all, every single file cabinet has been opened, every file removed, and Jesus has written something on all of them. Again, curiosity overwhelms the man. He goes over, pulls out the file, and looks, and where his name was has been scratched out, and Jesus has been written over. Our sins didn't just vanish. That Christ paid for them in his blood. And we somehow arrive at the conclusion that we are Christians second class because of the things that we've done, and it kind of weighs down on us when the reality is that we have been forgiven so long as we have sought forgiveness from him. And in those days, in the midst of the valley of the shadow of death, where we feel the sense of shame wearing down on us, we say, this day will I serve the Lord because I am thankful and know of his grace and his mercy that has paid the price and forgiven the very things that I have done, the very things that weigh me down. We choose to say, this day will I serve the Lord in both the highs and the lows. But there's a third type of day. A third type of day that we have to talk about as well, and that is the average day. If you've got your Bibles, turn me to Genesis chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6, and we're going to pick up in verse 9. It's a story that I suspect most of us are probably familiar with, the story of Noah. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. And Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark 300 cubits, its breadth 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. Make a roof for the ark and finish it to a cubit above, and set the door of the ark on its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life. Under heaven everything that is on earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you. And you shall come into the ark, you and your sons and your wives and your sons' wives with you. Skip down to verse 22. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. It's unclear as to exactly how long Noah works on the ark. We know it's 100 years from the time of his son's birth to the time of the flood. But it's unclear as to exactly how long it takes. Best estimates that I've seen are somewhere around 70 years. But it's safe to assume that it was decades. Not days, not weeks, not merely years, but decades of work. And I have an opinion, a guess, a thought that enters my mind based upon my knowledge of people and how we tend to work. And that is that initially I assume that Noah engaged in his task with gusto. After all, his life was in danger. His family's life was in danger. Something that he'd never seen before was going to come upon the earth. There was going to be a great and terrible flood that would destroy everything. And my assumption is that he begins his work with gusto. But the days, the weeks, the months, the years begin to churn by. And at some point, I assume that it became normal. An average normal day for Noah to go out and, well, got to go build the ark today. But somewhere along the line, it transitioned from a sense of urgency and a special kind of day to an average normal day. But what would have happened if Noah hadn't been faithful in the midst of the average normal days? What would have happened if Noah hadn't gone out to the ark and engaged in work and continued to build the ark on those average normal days? The flood would have come and he wouldn't have been ready. Does God care about the mundane? What do you think? Does he care about the taking out of trash? Does he care about the washing of dishes? Does he care about the washing of socks that seem to get eaten by the washer and are nowhere to be found ever again? Does he care about the mundane? On the one hand, maybe not, because he is the God of the universe, the almighty, infinite God who has better things to worry about than where our socks went. Yet at the same time, we're told that we're to do all things with an attitude of Christ, to do all things to serve him. Whatever you do in word or deed, do it to the glory of God, which suggests that he does care about the mundane. Maybe not so much the mundane task in and of itself, as much as the attitude with which the mundane task is engaged. For it is in the midst of those average days where we are most transformed. Because the average days are the most type of day. That's why it's called the average. It's the average type of day. Insurance salesmen, insurance companies are aware that most accidents happen within about a 1 to 5 mile radius of their house, of a person's house, I should say. Why is that? Why do you think most accidents happen within a 1 to 5 mile radius of home? It's because when we're closest to normal is when we're most content. When we're closest to normal is when we're most at ease. And I suspect the same is true, or can be true, of our walk with Christ. That on those days when we're on the mountaintop, man, it's easy to want to follow him. It's easy to commit our lives to him because we feel so close to him. We feel his goodness in our bones. And in those days, in the midst of the valley of the shadow of death, we're confronted with our need for him. We're reminded of just how much we need him, how we can't go through life without him. And so it's easy to cling to him. But the average days, the days where we're just kind of ticking along and there's nothing remarkable, either good nor bad about it, those can be challenging days. I don't know about you, but I find them most challenging because I have this list of things to do. And I kind of want to get them done because I feel a sense of joy whenever I get to cross it off. And if I don't get to cross it off, I feel a little bit irritable. But sometimes what God would want me to do on the average day and what I want to do, sometimes they don't align. And so I found myself uttering this daily prayer, Lord, help me to not be overwhelmed by all the things that I think that I need to do, but rather help me to see the opportunities you set before me and to seize those opportunities for you. Because the average days can be difficult. Not because they're hard to walk through, but because they're so easy to walk through. It can be easy to forget our God. And if research is accurate, it suggests that roughly less than 10% of Christians regularly read their Bible or engage in any kind of spiritual discipline, which suggests that most of us find average days to be difficult, at least difficult to maintain our relationship with our God. But yet, without the average days, we can't really grow. And it is the average days that prepares us for the mountaintop experiences and the valleys of the shadow of death. I want to read one last text with you. And that comes from Deuteronomy. The end of Deuteronomy chapter 34. And in this text, spoiler alert, Moses is about to die. If you remember the story of Moses, he's been told by God that he can't enter into the promised land. Moses had chosen to strike a rock instead of speaking to a rock. And God said, because you've done this, I'll let you see the promised land, but I'm not going to let you go into the promised land. And that's where we pick up in chapter 34. Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land, Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the Negev and the plain, that is the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees as far as Zor. And the Lord said to him, "This is the land which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to your offspring. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not go over there." So Moses, the servant of God, died there in the land of Moab according to the word of the Lord, and he buried him in the valley of the land of Moab opposite Beth Peor. But no one knows the place of his burial to this day. Question: who buried Moses? If you picked up on it, there are two people on a mountainside. One is Moses, one is God. When Moses dies, who is left? It's got to be God, because last I checked, dead people can't bury themselves. And here's the picture that seems to be painted. Moses and God go up on a mountainside, and God shows him all the land. And I wonder what that conversation was like. In my mind's eye, my assumption is, my guess is that God begins to talk about all the things that might happen. Now, this is going to be this group's land. This is going to be this group's land. This is going to be this group's land. These are the things that are going to take place. And at the same time, reminisce. Do you remember when we came across? Do you remember how hard it was to escape Pharaoh? Do you remember how we made it through the Red Sea? Almost like two old friends reminiscing about everything that has taken place in their lives. All the challenges they've made it through together. All the difficulties they faced and conquered. And then Moses dies. And the picture is God rolling up his own sleeves and burying his friend with his own two hands. Almost as though God says, no, I'll take care of all the arrangements. This is my friend. I'll take care of it. Nobody else is going to. And there he buries his lifelong friend, so much so that nobody knows where Moses is buried. What a relationship. What a connection between God and his friend, that God would say, no. Nobody else is going to bury Moses. I'll do it. Wouldn't you like to have a relationship to such an extent that God would say that about you? That at the end of your life, it would be like two lifelong friends sitting there together, reminiscing about how you made it through the mountains and the valleys and the average days together. About how at the end of all things, God would say, no, nobody else is going to take care of it. I'll take care of it. How did Moses end with that kind of relationship? How did he develop that kind of relationship with God? Day after day after day. The mountaintop experiences, where Moses literally went on top of a mountain and talked with God, where God's glory passes before him and Moses is overwhelmed so much so that he's glowing. Those valleys where Moses came down from the mountain, and there the people were worshiping idols and he had to break the tablets. And the average days that aren't recorded in Scripture because there was nothing to say. Nothing overly good, nothing overly bad, just another day walking towards the promised land. And the same is true of us. That the way we grow our relationship with God, the way we grow our friendship with him is not small moments of intense growth, but rather consistent growth, consistent time spent with him over a lifetime. So at the end of all things, we have such a relationship with him that not only does he call us his friend, calls us his child, and welcomes us into eternity. Perhaps you're here today, and you want to begin a relationship with the one who loves you most, the one who sacrificed everything that you might be able to spend eternity with him, and that relationship starts at baptism. Or perhaps you're here and you need the prayers of the church. If there's any way we can assist you, you can go to the back. There'll be somebody there to pray with you. You can come forward as we stand and sing.